Hi everyone, welcome. I'm down here in my wormery, and the tubs that you see right here, these are 10-day-old European nightcrawler worm composting systems, and the little shallow tub on top is the castings that they produced in the last system that they lived in. That system came to an end, so we relocated the worms, and the castings are being held behind rather than just being used directly out in the garden right away, because we're assuming that there's cocoons in this stuff, and that maybe in a month's time we could try rounding them up. So that's the whole idea of the nursery system. Yeah, you can see I got some other systems over this way too. But these are my newest, so the oldest stuff ends up on the left, newest stuff ends up on the right, and after 10 days in their new home, this will be their first feeding. So I'm going to get a glove on, get these systems up on the bench, get the worm bins fed. Maybe we'll take a peek on the nursery, although I'm not expecting much going on in there yet. Alright, let's get to work. When the time comes to feed the adult bins, I've got a variety of green stuff here. Looks like cucumber and who knows what else, some strawberry, days worth of coffee. But the cocoon nursery is where we're starting, where we're not feeding. Here we're just kind of checking in. After 10 days, you wouldn't expect much going on. So I don't want to even really till up the material too much. I just want to kind of peek in to make sure things look okay. And what we kind of left for ourselves here in the middle was a little care package of some of the large chunk materials that were still floating around within the system. That included this large stem of a pumpkin. And you might be recognizing this because it's the system. This is the system that we had done all the pocket feedings in. One of the pocket feedings included the feeding of a pumpkin, including the stem. It was always fun checking in on that corner of that system where the pumpkin had come from. And it's making some nice progress, I guess, but it's going to take a second system. At some point when we go to rounding up these worms in the system, whatever were left behind as part of the haul out, as well as whatever hatch from the cocoons in here, we'll probably use some of this old seasoned material to build up a area within the bin that might attract them. It might even be this container here that we just drop in some yummy scrumptious foods to start attracting stuff. But for now, it's just kind of a holding pen for some materials that sort of belong to the system but aren't really part of the finished castings themselves. Here too you can even see the diagram in which we used to be able to keep track of what was fed in which corner. And up here you can even read it if it's possible on the camera. Pumpkin stem. And at the time when this was printed, it was already 150 days old, and that was quite some time ago. So that pumpkin stem, even though it's not being worked right now, it will pick up again when it starts being reutilized after we do a haul out of babies and whatnot out of the system. So that's the nursery. Not much to see here. Let's get the first of the two adult bins out here and get them fed. It's always so peculiar when you grab one of your newer systems. They're so light. There's hardly anything to it. Luckily we've got the plastic here to make sure whatever moisture was included in the original build of the bin remains for the most part in here. Yeah, a little bit escapes around the edges, but for the most part I think the plastic's going to do a pretty good job keeping the moisture locked in, because a brand new system that's mainly bedding doesn't really have much ability to hang on to its moisture. So in the beginning I always want to help it out as much as I can. And the material in here looks really nice. Got to also remember when we launched the worms in, we launched the worms in with a lot of the material that they were inhabiting. We didn't take a great deal of effort to separate them from the castings that they were inhabiting. So I think the stuff we're actually seeing out here on the top surface could actually be the castings that came over with the worms originally. So we shouldn't feel like we've already accumulated this much castings material with these worms in only 10 days. I would think that the majority of what we're seeing here on the top is all stuff that came over with the wormies. Not to say that they're not producing fresh castings in here already. I'm sure they are. And as you can see, as we just peel back a little bit of the material, there's a good number of worms hanging out already. I wasn't really sure what to expect. A lot of times I figure in a brand new system, since it's mostly fresh bedding like what you're seeing down here, a lot of light color stuff. Whatever worms are around, they just blend in so well that it just becomes sort of, I don't know, not very interesting to me at least. When I look through a brand new system, all I see is shredded paper. Here and there I see a worm within it. To me it always seems like a lot more fun when you're picking through some of this nice black gold and you see the worms in it. So that's kind of a nice bonus there, is to be able to just pick around a little bit and see so many worms. Wow. It was kind of fun collecting everyone's guesses from the last video when we launched these bins to see how many worms people think they saw get released into here. And since there was 2 systems, theoretically getting an equal number of worms released into them, whatever number we came up with ended up being the estimate of how many worms live in each of these systems, in both of these systems. Each of these systems? I don't know. Basically, whatever number we come up with, which is just an average of everyone's estimates, is going to be my starting population estimate for both of these systems. So there is a lot of casting material in here. I don't know how much of it came over, how much of it was created here, but it is coming off to a pretty nice start, if I say so myself. But I do believe that a good amount of the stuff in here was just bought in with the worms, so I don't want to get myself too jazzed. But there also seems to be a pretty good sized population of worms in here too. Doing a really nice job getting things started in here. And, you know, they didn't get food, so maybe that's the other reason. They're just chowing right down on the bedding material that was in here. All kinds of shredded paper, shredded cardboard, leaves, you name it. All right. So let's start bringing in about half of what we intended to give them. Such a new shallow system, it seems like I've got nothing to cover up with here. I don't know. We'll see what we can do. Maybe some of it will peek out the top. That's okay. Not the end of the world. So some of this, let me see. Some of this is peels of cucumbers, but some of this is also, I guess, cucumbers that didn't pass initial quality control. So it seems like the majority of those all dropped out already. So I see one here. I see another couple larger bits here. So I just want to save a couple pieces of that sort of stuff for the other one as well. So it's a fair split across the 2 feedings. Here too, this stuff is strawberry. Probably mostly leaves and stems, but maybe some whole strawberries that were already perhaps not fit for human consumption. So that looks like quite a delicious feeding, if you ask me. Not only scrumptious and sweet, but juicy too. Yum yum. Let's dress this up a little bit though. One of the main things I like to dress up my worm bin feedings with is this pulverized eggshell. And it's just a placeholder for the generic ingredient in your worm bin feedings, the grit. So not everyone uses pulverized eggshell. Some people use pulverized crustacean shell. Some people use sand, rock dust, whatever the case may be. And especially in my newer systems like this one, I definitely like the idea of having grit applied pretty regularly in the early feedings, since the system has been built pretty much grit-free, from what I remember. So I think I even tried to remedy that with the new bin that I built. You might have saw it up on the shelf there, just an empty bin sitting up on the top of the shelf, pre-built a couple days ago, and I actually did include a good bit of grit in between the layers of bedding when I built that system. Not sure if I've done that much in the past, but I figured I would do it there. So that's a pretty nice feeding there for bin number 1. And from what I could tell, a pretty good sized worm population as well. So let's get the coverings back on here. I'm just thinking grit, food. I was thinking about adding bedding. Should we add bedding? Maybe we should. Let me grab some leaves. Somehow leaves just don't seem to get as much attention anymore in my wormery as they used to. It used to be my de facto bedding material until I got this really nifty shredder. But I just refilled my box, so I've got plenty of leaves on hand. And instead of putting the fresh bedding that they're getting right down into the feeding area, we'll do another sort of bedding application technique that I like doing, which is sort of giving the entire system a nice natural look by giving it a fresh top covering of nice leafy bedding. No signs of paper, cardboard, unnatural materials. Everything looks like it's the forest floor now. I like that. And then we can cover it with the newspaper. And, you know, putting it in here, you know, dry like this, I think we're in good shape, you know, because think of all the moisture coming out of that strawberry, out of that cucumber. I got a feeling if you were to combine those two, that would be just enough to get this leafy material nice and damp. So hopefully we don't end up with material in here that's perhaps a little too dry. I don't think there's much, you know, worry about that happening, but I guess that is the sort of thing you want to consider, you know, maybe, oh, have I created an imbalance by doing what I've done here? I think we're in good shape as far as this bin is concerned, so I'm not going to worry. Let's get the other one out here and give it a similar treatment. All right, well, I didn't show it on the other one, but here, as you can see, the label I created for this shows that this is bin number 2, so that's going to be our way to distinguish one from the other. But ideally, they were launched in a very similar way, and they'll be managed in a similar enough way that they're going to be almost like a, you know, cousins or twins practically. Maybe twins is the better way to think about it rather than sisters or cousins. Although right away, I guess, I like looking for differences when I'm running systems that are meant to be very similar to one another for whatever reason. You can see that this top covering piece of newspaper is pretty much toast. And I remember the top covering on the cocoon nursery, but I'm not even remembering now. Did we have a top covering on bin number 1, or did they just decimate that? And if we had waited another day, would this have already been gone too? So I don't know. Maybe that means bin 1 has a larger population because they did away with this top covering paper. I'm not sure. Okay, I took a break there to rewatch the video, and I did confirm that bin number 1 had a pretty intact piece of newspaper, which was returned on top of the fresh leaves and placed under the plastic when we finished. So this is not going to cut it. We'll just use that as bedding down within the feeding area, and then we'll go ahead, give them a fresh replacement top covering. How does that sound? Pretty pathetic that I can't remember that far back. So let's see. Let's try to stick to the whole idea of treating these systems equally in terms of checking them out. So here too, it does seem like maybe pulling the top layer of castings together, like I'm doing here, seems to be a much thinner, shallower layer. So I wonder if I wonder what that could mean. You know, I thought right away when I first saw how this system had more quickly deteriorated their top covering paper, made me just sort of jump to a possible conclusion there that this system might have more worms in it than the other. But I think we're just going to stick to the estimates of what me and 9 others guessed. So I averaged all those numbers together into a total which is just shy of 2,500, 2,490. 2,490 is the estimated population of each of these worm bins. And pretty much anywhere you look, there's worms pretty much everywhere. The moisture level in here down low within the system, not bad. It almost does seem like a little extra moisture wouldn't hurt. And the cucumbers that they're getting, the strawberries that they're getting, all has some nice moisture content to it. So I'm kind of hoping that that'll compensate pretty good for the dry leaves we're going to sprinkle on top at the end. Yeah, I mean, there is a good number of worms, you know, mixed into all this light colored bedding material. It's just that they're a little tough to see, you know. That's the reason it's sometimes maybe not so exciting to look through your brand new worm bin. You see all kinds of shredded materials and bedding, and even though the worms are right there in front of you, they're kind of blending in, so you get this sort of misinterpretation of what's really going on in your system just because of the camouflage aspect in a way. But yeah, this system definitely looks pretty good in terms of the worm population. We're going to go ahead and drop in today's feeding for them. I do have a coffee filter here, and even though we didn't institute feeding zone indicators in the other system, we could do it today in this one, and maybe next time we come in, maybe we'll have another coffee filter we could use. I've only got this one, but we'll maybe next time on the next go around include a feeding zone indicator for that other system. But for now, we've only got one. All the stuff that I bought down here frozen is thawing out at this point, so this bag still has a few chunks of food left in it. I'm going to I'll fish that out later. Let's see how much of the strawberry we can get to drop out here too. Alright, that all came out pretty nicely. And yeah, there we go. Nice juicy bits for them. The other thing we included was a nice portion of grit to go with the feeding. Very nice. And we didn't really add bedding except for the fresh leaves on top, so we're going to do the same here. Kind of maintain consistency. I guess the only intentional deviation here is going to be the inclusion of a feeding zone indicator on this system. And then at some point in the near future, we'll make sure the other one gets one too. Although you wouldn't expect a whole lot of difference one system to the other just because of an extra piece of paper floating out on top. Oops, did I forget to add coffee? It would seem that I did. And I guess it wouldn't be me if I didn't forget something along the way, right? Let's make sure this portion of coffee gets included down here in the feeding as well. Now we've got ourselves an empty coffee filter that could be used as a feeding zone indicator. Very nice, very nice. Let's drape that out over on top of the fresh leaves once we add them, and as long as we're here, we'll drop in that too. Let's see, how much did we use? Maybe about 2 handfuls if I remember correctly, roughly speaking. Sort of like that right there. And if the newspaper getting gobbled up the way we saw it when we first came in here was evidence of their appetite for carbon, maybe we'll see quite a reduction of this leaf bedding, as well as this new replacement piece of paper, which is now double sheets, not a single sheet. And then I actually wonder, maybe the coffee filter, the feeding zone indicator, should really go in underneath our newspaper, since the newspaper is technically sort of a top covering. Try to give everything its function and its role. And what we can do in terms of keeping things in sync, we'll do that too. But I think we're pretty much done here. I check in with my 10-day-old European nightcrawler systems numbers 1 and 2, as well as the cocoon nursery. And I think, you know, just based on the number of worms I was seeing in here, and the fact that what they got is probably stuff that's not going to last very long, we might want to come back in here in another 7 or 10 days again and get them fed again. So for now, we're done. I've got a few things to put away and clean up, but I'm not going to waste your time with that. Before I go, let me really quickly say thank you. Thank you so much for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. If you did, as always, please don't forget to leave me a quick thumbs up before you go. And if you haven't done so already, please also consider subscribing to the channel. All right, everyone, have a great day. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.